Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Walt here from Down the Block Sports, and today I want to talk about the NFL draft. Kyle Russo and we're going to talk about NFL draft prospects, who we like, where they could get drafted. We're going to go through a ton of different guys, but today we're going to start with Alabama tackle Evan Neal. Before we get started, Kyle, welcome back to the Alec Walt Show. I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me back on. Looking forward to it.
So Evan Neal, the tackle out of Alabama. Guy played all over the place. So versatility is one of his strengths, but is projected to play left tackle in the NFL. According to his NFL page right now, he's 6'7.5", 337 pounds. We've seen his weight kind of all over the place, but Kyle, it looks like the left tackle has a chance to be a real high upside guy at a premier position in the NFL.
Yeah, Alec, I don't think there's much negative when you look at an Evan Neal. He has some comparisons to an Orlando Brown in terms of movement, in terms of size, but he has better speed than Orlando Brown. He has some aspects of maybe a Trent Williams is the best comparison that I've seen personally. But he's a day one impact starter for any one of these top five teams. I think that's kind of been the come to fruition kind of stance, right? Evan Neal is not falling out of the top five. If it does, it'll be absolutely insanity. He's being labeled as one of the best offensive linemen of the last decade worth of classes, being labeled as the guaranteed number one overall pick. We were joking about it before we started this recording that maybe him not participating in any combine stuff, not even a broad jump or a bench press or a 40, that might mean that he might already be the solidified number one overall pick in this year's draft because he has nothing left to prove. He's been pretty healthy throughout his career at Alabama. You brought up versatility as well, moving all around. So if he is picked by a team that doesn't necessarily need a left tackle, which would be weird if he doesn't get picked by a team that needs a left tackle and they move him into maybe a right tackle because I know he played that at Alabama as well. But he's a day one starter, an immediate impact player. And maybe we'll talk about some of the negatives that I see with him. And they're very few, they're very minuscule. But the biggest thing with me is this when it comes to Evan Neal, and you could attest to this as well, is when watching him in Alabama, especially these last couple of years, he's had some of the most talented offensive linemen with him to be in the NFL the last couple of years, right? Look at Jedrick Wills, a top 10 offensive lineman picked in the draft. You look at a Alex Leatherwood, who was a top 20 pick. You look at Landon Dickerson, who was a second round pick. Deontay Brown, who was a later round pick, but still a starting offensive lineman, I believe, for the Carolina Panthers. So that's what he's had to work with. Now, granted, he lines up on that left-hand side, but a little bit concerning when you say to yourself, well, any team that he goes to, especially if you talk about the Jaguars, if we talk about solidified number one overall pick, he's going to have nobody helping him out. He's going to be covering other people's assignments. So it becomes a little concerning if you look and break it down like that. But I think that this guy has tremendous upside, like you said. And I think that he's going to be a really, really talented NFL player.
Yeah, I mean, you look like the number one overall pick. It's not like that team was just contending for a Super Bowl or anything. The number one
No.
pick in the NFL draft goes to the worst team in the National Football League. So, you can say that a lot of Alabama players because it seems like that team is pretty deep from top to bottom on a yearly basis. But Kyle, you're certainly not wrong. He had all the pieces he needed alongside the offensive line with him at Alabama. And if he goes to the Jags or under any of the other early teams here in the first round, that's certainly not going to be the case. But yes, looking at Evan Neal, he is an absolute brick wall. Like I mentioned before, 6'7", 330. The guy can move. He's extremely athletic, can set the pocket, has the ability to be a premier left tackle. And normally when you look at the number one overall pick, we've seen QBs, we've seen edge rushers. Kyle, I look at this guy and I do think he is worthy of going with the number one overall pick. I mean, he started every year at Alabama, yes, at multiple positions at times, but he played against some of the top talent. He has that wall and that upside to be a left tackle. And I think that's enough for a guy like Trevor Lawrence. You look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, their priority this year has been to find the right pieces to help Trevor Lawrence. They have the head coach. They need to protect him on the offensive line. Personally, if I saw Neal go number one overall, I would not be upset. I think that'd be a great situation here for Jacksonville. What do you think about him potentially going number one overall?
I don't mind it at all, especially when you have such high stakes in drafting a quarterback of Trevor Lawrence's magnitude, right? Just last year, Jaguars picked him with the number one overall pick, and he was being compared to a Peyton Manning and an Andrew Luck. And based on the start of those guys' careers and similarity, is that, at least for the first few years, more so with Andrew Luck, is that no protection whatsoever led to an eventual short end of Andrew Luck's career. And you don't want to see the same thing happen with the Trevor Lawrence, because you saw some bright spots. Again, he was given a very, very raw end of the deal, did not have any offensive line support, lost his running back teammate in Travis Etienne before he even took the field for a day one start. Excuse me. But all he essentially had was James Robinson. The wide receiver core was very, very thin. DJ Chark went down. Obviously, we know about the coaching situation, so got a raw end of the stick. No doubt about it. But what we know about football, Alec, is that number one, you're not going to win anything in the NFL unless you have a solid quarterback. I think Jacksonville has that. Obviously, you need to build a team around them. But number two, more importantly enough, is which we see with a bunch of NFL teams, especially picking the top of this class, is they all have a similar standpoint. Is if that you don't have a guy guaranteed protecting your blind side, you have no function offensively. Your quarterback is not going to have enough time to get it out of the pocket, get it out of his hands, and give it off to a receiver, give it off to a running back. And Evan Neal is being labeled as that guy to potentially be able to do so on a professional and highest level of stance. And I think that when you break it down, you say to yourself, well, how can Jacksonville mess this up? And I don't think that it would be a mess up if they went elsewhere, because there's a lot of great other players. Aiden Hutchinson on the defensive end. They could, of course, use some defensive line help, as since 2017, Jacksonville has deteriorated completely. That whole defensive front, that whole defensive secondary. So they're in the rebuilding stage as well and can go elsewhere. But if they are really serious about Trevor Lawrence and wanting to protect him, obviously free agency happens first. So we'll see what comes in the next couple of weeks. But if they don't address the left tackle position or the offensive line position in free agency, they must go with an offensive lineman. I think Evan Neal is that guy.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at some of the last couple picks they've made, we talk about the first round. They took Clavon Chase on. Yes, he hasn't translated the best early on in his career. They also have Josh Allen, who's looking like one of the better young edge rushers in the NFL. So they are okay at that edge spot going into next year. Yes, adding depth at that position could never hurt. I mean, Allen and Hutchinson coming off the edge seems like a nasty duo, like you mentioned before. But if Trevor Lawrence is a priority, I really like going in that direction. Now, obviously, with the strengths, there are some weaknesses. Kyle, I want to make sure you have the opportunity to give your take there on with Evan Neal.
Yeah, so with the weaknesses I brought up earlier, I think that weight is probably the biggest of concerns. Health. He started 39 games in his 3 years at Alabama, so basically starting every single opportunity in which he had, starting at, I believe, as a true redshirt freshman, which just shows the level of play in which he brought to the table just as a young guy coming out of high school. On top of the fact that when you break down that offensive line class in which I talked about, he made it on an offensive line with some of the best offensive line talent to come into the NFL throughout the last couple of years. So that says something. On top of playing against some of the best talent in the entire country in the SEC. So I think that favors him tremendously. With weight, again, that's a big concern. We've all seen the infamous, I guess you'd call it, photo of him trimmed down side body image of, he might be 6'7", and he might be labeled as this 360, 350-pound guy, but he's really only 330, 340-pound guy now. And you talked about it as well prior, is that with his with the combine coming up, obviously he's not participating in anything, but guys lose some weight, they trim, they slim down a little bit, try to find that comfortable playing weight. But he alludes to the fact that he's felt comfortable in any weight that he's played in, but feels at one of his best stances in terms of his individuality that he's played at it throughout the entirety of his career, potentially at the weight that he's at now. So that could be a highlight, and that could be something that we're looking at too much and saying that this guy is a tremendous player. He's being compared to a Trent Williams. He's being compared to an Orlando Brown, some of the best offensive line talent that is in the NFL, especially the left tackle position, especially being compared to Trent Williams, because, he might be the best left tackle in all of football right now.
He's a stud. He's an absolute stud.
But his athletic ability that Evan Neal contains with the size that he has, you don't see that very often. And I think that's what's so intriguing about his play, along with the fact that he's been as healthy as he's been. In fact, I think the only time that he's missed any time, I think in 2020, he might have dealt with a bout of COVID, but he still wound up playing in the SEC championship game anyway. I don't know if he actually missed a game in that season or not. Obviously a crazy time at that point in time, but there's nothing really against this guy that's really knocking his play. played against some of the best talent, has tremendous skill, strength, and athletic ability at his size, played for Alabama. Tell me, Alec, let me reiterate the same statement back to you. What are the negatives that you see with a Evan Neal?
It's really tough to pick a weakness. I mean, because he's big, he's smooth, he's quality in the pass game, he's strong in the run game. I mean, he's the most complete tackle in this draft, in my opinion. I don't think it's really even close. He
Yeah,
hasn't shown much durability issues. I'm not worried at all about him not going to the combine because he's shown on tape that he's strong, he's athletic, he's quick, and he has football speed, NFL level football speed that can start on day one. Really, my only concern with him is where he's going, if you
yeah.
want my true and honest opinion. I
So,
think this guy is one of the most complete tackle prospects we've seen in a very long time.
so your take, just so I get this clear understanding, is just that you have no problem with the individual talent, just in terms of the situation that he falls into, is where you think is the most
And I
concerning.
said that about Trevor last year too. Is I
Yeah,
think Trevor is the best QB prospect, but he's going to be in a situation that
yeah,
I mean, he couldn't control what happened last year, and I do think their coaching does improve with Doug Peterson because I think he has a legitimate playbook and a legitimate strategy for his offensive line and a legitimate, strategy to develop a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. I do think he is a quality head coach for the position he's in, but there was a lot bad in Jacksonville last year,
yeah,
and I do think a lot of things changed. But Trevor was basically on an island at a lot of moments.
yeah.
And it's going to be a tough adjustment from that, and that's really my biggest concern with Neal is that adjustment from a situation that's near perfect to extremely unpredictable on a weekly basis.
I mean, we'll see what happens because we keep on talking about, Trevor Lawrence being protected. I know I've highlighted that, but just in some little research that I've done here on the side, he was actually ranked 20th in terms of being sacked in the NFL last year, which isn't so bad as much as we talk about how porous this offensive line is. And I don't think that you could miss on an Evan Neal, but like you said as well, maybe it becomes an easier transition if we see in the next 2 weeks than building out that offensive line a little bit in the interior on the right side at the guard position. And then we say, okay, well, that's the last piece of the puzzle. Lock it down. Trevor Lawrence is protected, guaranteed. We'll see what happens. But obviously, can't predict what's going to happen in Jacksonville's mind, seeing what they're going to do just in the coming weeks. But I think, again, for my final conclusion, I think that you can't miss with Evan Neal, but I would not be surprised if they look elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I think he is going to be the number one overall pick as of now. We'll release some mock drafts down the road here on Down the Block Sports. But Kyle Russo and I are going to start talking about some of the individual prospects here in the 2022 NFL draft. So, Kyle, before we leave, how can our listeners keep in touch with you on social media and listen to some of your podcasts?
So on Instagram at Kyle Russo 612. Make sure to follow me if you like what you've heard. And also, as Alec alluded to, a part of the Review and Preview Sports Brand, a show every Wednesday night from 7 to 9 p.m., talking all things about sports. Make sure to give us a follow on Facebook. That's where you can find us live stream. And as well on YouTube, have a YouTube channel as well at Review and Preview Sports. So make sure to like and subscribe to that as well. Have a lot of great content coming out. And along with myself, have a solid crew. With me producing great videos, producing great content day in and day out. So, Alec, thank you again for having me on, man. Really do appreciate it as always, and looking forward to more opportunities with you as well.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of The Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside Kyle Russo. What do you think of Evan Neal? Do you think he should be the number one pick in the 2022 NFL draft? Feel free to give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you very soon.